It was nearly midnight when Derek Moore stepped into the marble-floored lobby of the Grand Carlton Hotel, suitcase in hand and exhaustion written across his face. The chandeliers above cast a golden glow across the quiet space, reflecting off polished brass and the faint scent of lavender from the lobby's diffuser. The hotel was famous, 5 stars known for its impeccable service and luxury clientele. But that night it felt strangely cold. Derek had flown in from Chicago after 3 back-to-back investor meetings. His connecting flight had been delayed, his dinner cancelled, and his patience worn thin. All he wanted was a hot meal, a shower, and a few hours of rest before his morning presentation. At the front desk stood Melissa, a young receptionist with a perfect smile and a voice that carried the polished warmth of someone trained to sound friendly on cue. "Good evening, sir. Welcome to the Grand Carlton. Checking in." "Yes," Derek said, setting his briefcase down. "A reservation under Moore, Derek Moore." Her fingers danced across the keyboard. "Ah, yes, Mr. Moore, 3 nights deluxe suite. We have you all set. Here's your keycard." "Appreciate it," he said, returning her smile faintly. "Could you also send up a late dinner to my room?" "Just something simple. Grilled salmon, rice, and water." Melissa's smile faltered slightly. "I'm afraid the kitchen's closed for the evening, sir." "Room service stops at 10, Derek frowned. "Really? I've stayed here before and they've always offered late service." She hesitated. "I'm sorry, sir, but that policy recently changed." Before he could reply, another guest, a man in a navy blazer, loud and slightly unsteady from drink, walked up beside him. "Hey, Mel," the man said with a grin. "Can you have the kitchen send up another steak to my room?" "Medium rare this time." Melissa laughed softly. "Of course, Mr. Hampton. I'll let the kitchen know right away." Her tone had shifted, light, familiar, deferential. Derek blinked. "Wait, you just said the kitchen was closed." Melissa froze for half a second. "Oh, Mr. Hampton is a preferred guest. Exceptions can sometimes be made." Derek looked at her evenly. "I'm sure the kitchen can handle 1 more plate." "I'm sorry, sir," she said again, her voice stiffer now. "It's not possible tonight." The man beside them chuckled. "Don't take it personal, buddy. They just like to keep things nice and exclusive here." Derek's expression didn't change, but his eyes sharpened slightly. He'd dealt with this tone before, polite dismissal disguised as professionalism. He didn't argue. He simply nodded, took his keycard and headed toward the elevator. Upstairs, his suite was immaculate, panoramic city view, marble bathroom, the faint hum of quiet air conditioning. But for the first time, the luxury felt hollow. He called the front desk again. A different voice answered. "This is the Grand Carlton front desk. How may I assist you?" "Hi, this is Derek Moore in 1508. I'd like to place a room service order if possible." A pause. Then, "I'm sorry, sir, but room service is closed for the night." He smiled faintly to himself. "All right. Thank you." He hung up, opened his briefcase, and began reviewing the next day's schedule. The hotel he was inspecting tomorrow, the very one he was staying in, was set to be part of a larger acquisition deal. The Grand Carlton was one of several properties his company, Moore Hospitality Group, had recently purchased. He hadn't yet introduced himself to the staff. That would come in the morning during the formal management meeting. He hadn't planned to test the service tonight. But now, they'd done that for him. After 10 minutes of reading through the property's recent performance reports, Derek noticed something interesting. The most recent internal memo, one sent from the hotel's regional office, mentioned a new emphasis on client experience and inclusivity. The irony made him exhale a quiet laugh. He reached for his phone and called Eleanor Price, the group's senior operations manager. She answered groggily. "Derek? It's midnight. Sorry to wake you," he said calmly. "Just wanted to flag something before tomorrow's meeting. The Carlton has a culture issue. It'll need immediate correction." She stirred. "Already? You just checked in." "I did," he said. "And I was just denied room service that was apparently open for preferred guests. I'd like the management team assembled in the lobby at 8 sharp. There was silence on the other end. Then, "Understood." He hung up and returned to his notes. For a few minutes he read through reports of customer complaints, small ones mostly overlooked by the local team, patterns of selective treatment, service inconsistencies, and subtle biases that had gone unchecked for months. By morning, those inconsistencies would no longer be hidden. The next day dawned bright and clear. Derek was up early, dressed in a tailored grey suit and navy tie. His calm demeanor returned, every trace of fatigue gone. When he stepped into the elevator, two guests whispered quietly, one recognizing him from a recent business article in Forbes. In the lobby, the hotel's general manager, Carl Benson, stood near the reception desk with three department heads. The same front desk clerk from the night before, Melissa, was there too, her posture stiff when she saw him approaching. "Good morning, Mr. Moore," Carl said with a practiced smile. "I hope your stay has been pleasant so far." Derek looked at him, expression neutral. "It's been informative." Carl's smile faltered slightly. "Informative?" "Yes," Derek said evenly. "Would you mind stepping into the conference room? There's something we need to discuss before the investor tour this afternoon." The group exchanged uncertain glances, but followed him inside. The room was sleek, glass table, modern lighting, and a tray of coffee and pastries waiting at the center. Derek placed his briefcase on the table and clicked it open. "Before we begin, I'd like to thank everyone for your work in maintaining this property. The Grand Carlton is a cornerstone of our hospitality portfolio." Carl looked confused. "I'm sorry, our portfolio?" Derek's gaze lifted. "Moore Hospitality Group. As of last quarter, your hotel is one of our acquisitions. I'm Derek Moore, Chief Executive Officer." The color drained from Carl's face. Melissa's hand froze on the coffee pot. For a few seconds, no one spoke. Derek's voice remained calm, his words precise. "Last night I arrived unannounced. I ordered room service, politely. I was told the kitchen was closed. 10 minutes later, another guest was served a full meal. I was denied service not because of policy, but because of perception," Carl stammered. "Mr. Moore, I can explain." "You don't need to," Derek interrupted softly. The explanation was clear enough. He turned slightly toward Melissa. "And you had the chance to do your job with fairness. Instead, you made an assumption about who deserved service and who didn't. Do you remember that conversation?" Her eyes filled with panic. I didn't mean—" He nodded slightly. "Intentions don't fix culture. Actions do." The silence was thick, broken only by the faint hum of the air conditioning. Derek glanced down at his folder. "Effective immediately, Mr. Benson. You're relieved of your position as general manager. HR will process your exit package today. As for Ms. Hughes," he said, turning to Melissa, "you'll be reassigned to training and evaluation, under direct supervision from corporate. If progress isn't evident in 90 days, your employment will be reconsidered." Carl looked stunned. "You can't just—" "I already have," Derek said evenly. "This company doesn't reward selective service. It rewards integrity." He gathered his papers, his tone steady but not unkind. "You both should remember something. Luxury isn't marble floors or chandeliers. It's respect for everyone who walks through those doors." As he left the room, the silence behind him said everything. In the lobby, guests and staff glanced up as Derek walked out toward the morning light, his phone already buzzing with calls from corporate. The same receptionist who had dismissed him just hours ago now watched as the man she'd brushed off stepped confidently into a waiting car, the one sent for the CEO. The doors closed, and the reflection of the Grand Carlton shimmered briefly on the window before disappearing down the street. For Derek, it wasn't about revenge. It was about standards and the quiet power of being underestimated just long enough to prove exactly who you are. The next morning, the story had already spread through the hotel like wildfire. Staff whispered in corners, managers double-checked their schedules, and the sound of polished shoes echoed across marble floors more nervously than usual. Derek Moore, however, wasn't thinking about last night's humiliation anymore. He was thinking about why it had happened, not as a personal slight, but as a reflection of something much deeper. As he sat in the hotel's private lounge, coffee in hand and laptop open, he reviewed the Grand Carlton's internal reports again. The data confirmed what his experience had already told him: inconsistency. Guest satisfaction numbers for preferred clients were high, but for others, particularly guests booking without corporate accounts or membership status, the ratings dropped sharply. The comments section was full of polite complaints written between the lines: "Felt overlooked," Staff seemed distracted, didn't feel welcome. Derek leaned back in his chair and exhaled. These weren't just numbers. They were stories. He'd lived one of them the night before. A knock sounded on the door. His operations director, Eleanor Price, entered holding a folder. She was sharp, professional, and one of the few people in the company who could read Derek's mood without him saying much. "Morning," she said quietly. "You made quite the impression last night." He gave a small smile. "Word travels fast." "By sunrise," she said, setting the folder down. Staff morale split. Half are shocked, the other half are, well, relieved. Apparently Benson wasn't exactly a favorite among his employees. "That doesn't surprise me," Derek said. "He built authority, not leadership." Eleanor nodded. "I've already spoken with HR. We'll send in interim management until we find a proper replacement. I also drafted a notice about our commitment to service standards and inclusivity." "Want to read it before it goes out?" "Please," he said. She handed him a printed draft. He read quietly, eyes scanning each line. "At Moore Hospitality Group, excellence begins with respect. We serve every guest with equal care, dignity, and gratitude, because hospitality is not a privilege. It's a promise." He smiled faintly and slid it back across the table. "That's perfect. Send it." Eleanor hesitated before adding, "Melissa, the receptionist, came in early this morning asking if she could speak with you privately." Derek paused, setting down his coffee. "Did she say why?" "She said she wanted to apologize." He thought for a moment. "Send her in." A few minutes later, there was a timid knock at the door. Melissa entered slowly, clutching a notepad she clearly didn't need. Her uniform was immaculate, but her hands fidgeted at her sides. "Good morning, Mr. Moore," she said softly. He gestured toward the seat across from him. "Morning, Melissa." "Please sit," she obeyed, eyes down. "I wanted to apologize for last night," she began. "I wasn't trying to be disrespectful. I made a judgment call and it was the wrong one." "Tell me," Derek said gently, "what kind of judgment call?" She hesitated. "I thought you were just another guest. Tired, impatient, maybe a little pushy. I didn't realize that I was the CEO." He finished. She flushed. "Yes," he nodded slowly. "But that's the point, isn't it? You shouldn't have to know who someone is to treat them right." She looked up for the first time, her eyes glassy. "You're right. I don't have an excuse. I just got too used to guessing who mattered most around here. Mr. Benson used to say, 'Know your guests. Some are worth more attention than others.' I thought that was just part of the job." Derek exhaled, his tone calm but steady. "That's not hospitality. That's hierarchy. It poisons a place from the inside out." "I know," she said softly. "I want to fix it. I'll take any training, any shift you assign me. I don't want to be that kind of employee again." He studied her quietly for a moment. "People make mistakes, Melissa. What matters is what they learn from them. If you're willing to rebuild, we'll give you the chance." Tears welled in her eyes. "Thank you, sir." "Don't thank me," he said. "Prove me right for giving you another shot." She nodded firmly, stood and left the room. When the door closed, Derek sat back in silence for a few moments. He'd seen countless corporate issues in his years as a CEO, but few cut as close to home as this one. He'd built his company to redefine the meaning of luxury, not as something expensive, but as something human. That evening, he called a staff-wide meeting in the ballroom. The entire hotel team gathered, front desk clerks, housekeeping, kitchen, maintenance. The mood was uneasy at first, whispers rippling through the crowd as Derek stepped up to the podium. "Good evening," he began, his voice calm but firm. "Some of you know who I am. For those who don't, my name is Derek Moore, and I'm the CEO of Moore Hospitality Group, the company that owns this hotel." The room went still. "I checked in last night as a guest," he continued. "No titles, no introductions. Just another traveler looking for service. What I saw told me more about this place than any report could." He paused, letting the silence hang before he spoke again. "This isn't about one mistake or one employee. It's about culture. Somewhere along the way, this hotel and others like it forgot what hospitality actually means. It's not about who pays the most or who looks the part. It's about respect. For every guest, for every person." Heads slowly nodded around the room. "We're not here to punish," he said. "We're here to rebuild. Effective immediately. We're launching new service training across all departments, focused not on procedures but on empathy. Because our success doesn't come from 5 stars on a website. It comes from the 5 minutes of kindness that make someone feel seen. The crowd was quiet, but the air had shifted. For the first time in years, employees felt something they hadn't before: accountability paired with belief. When the meeting ended, staff members lined up to shake his hand. Housekeepers, bellhops, even cooks from the kitchen came forward, thanking him for saying what no one else had. Later that night, Derek returned to his suite. The city skyline glowed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the lights reflecting softly against the glass. He loosened his tie and poured himself a glass of water. He thought about his mother, how she used to tell him, "Never let anyone convince you your worth depends on where you stand. It depends on how you stand." He smiled faintly. "You were right, Mom," he murmured. The Grand Carlton would recover. Policies would change. People would learn and culture would evolve. But for Derek, this wasn't about one hotel anymore. It was about something bigger, proving that respect, like leadership, wasn't something you earned with a title. It was something you lived by quietly, consistently, and without exception. The following week brought a noticeable calm to the Grand Carlton Hotel, but beneath the polished quiet, change was moving like an unseen tide. What had happened that night, when a guest became a mirror for the entire organization, was now the story whispered between departments and across phone lines to sister hotels within the company. For Derek Moore, it wasn't gossip that mattered. It was transformation. He had built Moore Hospitality Group on a principle his mother had taught him long before he ever owned a company. Service without humility is just performance. And now he was determined to remind everyone of that truth, starting right where it had been forgotten. That Monday morning, he arrived at the Grand Carlton's ballroom again, this time not for a reprimand but for a reset. Every employee was there. Bellhops, servers, receptionists, security, and even the kitchen staff still wearing aprons. The chatter quieted as Derek took the small stage. "Last week," he began, "this hotel made headlines for the wrong reasons." No one spoke. He continued, voice calm but direct. "But I didn't come here to talk about embarrassment. I came here to talk about opportunity. What happens next is what defines us, not the mistake but the response to it." He gestured toward the projection screen behind him. Photos appeared. Images of smiling guests, diverse employees, handwritten thank you notes left by travelers from all over the world. "Hospitality," Derek said, "isn't marble floors and expensive linens. It's what happens in the quiet moments when no one's watching. It's how you treat a stranger when you have nothing to gain." He paused, letting the silence stretch. "I've been that stranger more times than you think." A few people shifted, knowing exactly what he meant. Derek took a breath, then nodded toward Melissa, who sat in the second row. "I asked one of your own team members to share her perspective today, Ms. Hughes." Melissa froze for a moment, then stood. The room turned toward her as she walked hesitantly to the microphone. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice was steady. "I made a mistake," she began, "and I'm not proud of it. I let assumption take the place of service. I judged someone before I even asked what they needed." She looked out at the faces before her. "But I've learned something this week, that respect isn't a policy. It's a choice. Every time we speak to someone, every time we serve, we get to choose whether we see them as a guest or as a number." Her voice caught for a moment, but she continued, "I want to be the kind of employee who makes people feel seen again. And I think we all can be." When she finished, a quiet round of applause spread through the room. Derek stepped forward and placed a hand on her shoulder, nodding once. "That's leadership," he said simply. After the meeting, Derek stayed behind as staff filtered out. A few lingered to shake his hand. One housekeeper, her uniform neatly pressed and her smile soft, said quietly, "I've worked here 15 years, sir. Nobody's ever spoken to us like that before." Derek smiled. "Then it's about time someone did." Over the next several days, Derek and Eleanor launched what they called the Carlton Renewal Program, a complete retraining initiative focusing on empathy, equality, and presence. Every department had workshops, and every manager had to re-earn certification in guest equity. But for Derek, it wasn't just a training plan. It was personal. Late one night, after most of the lights in the hotel had dimmed, he sat alone in the executive office reviewing the new progress reports. The numbers were promising. Customer satisfaction had risen sharply, and employee morale surveys showed a quiet but unmistakable shift. Still, there was one file he kept returning to, the Grand Carlton's history of selective guest prioritization. It was an internal metric hidden deep in the property's old system, used to categorize guests by perceived importance. The higher the value, the faster they were served. The lower, the longer the wait. He frowned, scrolling through the data. It was subtle, but the implications were clear. Certain types of guests, solo travelers, those with certain names, certain accents, had been statistically deprioritized. He picked up his phone and called Eleanor. She answered almost instantly. "Working late again?" she asked. "As always," he said. "Listen, I need every property in our group to disable the value tier service code, effective immediately." There was a pause. "All of them?" "That'll change the entire booking model." "I know," Derek said, "but if it's not fair, it's not worth keeping." He could hear her smiling faintly on the other end. "You really mean to rebuild this from the ground up, don't you?" "I do," he said simply. "We can't claim to be a hospitality company if we're not human first." The next morning, an internal memo went out to every hotel under Moore Hospitality's name. It was titled simply, "Respect Without Condition." It outlined the new policy: no guest rankings, no prioritization based on membership, attire, or perceived wealth. Every request was to be handled with the same urgency and care, whether it came from a billionaire or a backpacker. By noon, emails started pouring in, some from skeptical managers, others from staff who finally felt seen. That evening, Derek took a quiet walk through the hotel's lobby. The air felt different now, and lighter, warmer, alive again. He noticed little things: a bellhop taking time to help an elderly guest find her room, the receptionist offering tea to a traveler waiting for a cab, the soft hum of conversation that wasn't forced or scripted. As he stood by the entrance, Melissa approached him again, this time with confidence. "Mr. Moore," she said, "I just wanted to say, the energy around here feels different, better." He smiled. "That's what happens when people start caring again." She nodded. "You were right. Luxury really isn't about the marble floors." "No," Derek said softly, glancing around the bright lobby. "It's about how people feel when they walk across them." He stayed there a moment longer, watching as guests moved easily through the space. No one ignored, no one overlooked. It wasn't perfection, but it was progress, and for Derek Moore, progress was the quiet kind of victory that didn't need applause, only consistency. Because true leadership, he knew, wasn't about firing people for mistakes. It was about changing the world that allowed those mistakes to happen in the first place. By the end of the month, the Grand Carlton had transformed. The change wasn't loud or flashy. No press releases, no corporate slogans plastered across the walls, but it was visible in the small things that defined real service. Smiles that reached the eyes, voices that sounded genuine, guests who left comments not about decor or luxury, but about kindness. For Derek Moore, that was the true measure of success. He had spent 2 decades climbing through boardrooms and airports, learning that real hospitality wasn't about image. It was about intention. The events that brought him to this point, a quiet denial of service, an uncomfortable reminder of perception, had become something larger than a bad night. They had become a catalyst. He arrived at the hotel early that morning for one final visit before returning to Chicago. The lobby buzzed gently with life, travelers checking in, staff moving with purpose. He noticed Melissa, the front desk receptionist, greeting a family with warm professionalism. When she spotted him, she smiled and waved briefly before returning to her guests. That small moment made Derek pause. A few weeks ago, she would have looked past people like that, choosing polish over presence. Now she seemed genuinely engaged. That, he thought, was what leadership was meant to do. Not control people, but awaken something in them. He made his way upstairs to the executive suite, where Eleanor Price was already waiting with her tablet. "Morning," she said. "You'll be happy to know guest satisfaction scores are up 15% since the new policy rolled out." "Corporate's impressed?" Derek smiled faintly. "It's a good start. Staff turnover's dropped too," she added. "People want to stay now. Apparently they feel like this place finally has a soul again. That's worth more than any 5-star review," he said. Eleanor looked at him thoughtfully. "So what's next for you?" "You've turned the Carlton around." Going to stay involved or hand it off to the regional team? He leaned against the window, watching sunlight glint off the city below. I'll let them take it from here. If they understand the why, they'll handle the how, she smiled. You always say that. Teach the why, not the what. I should start writing these down, he chuckled. Just remember one thing. People never forget how you make them feel. That's the only rule worth keeping. As Eleanor left to prepare for their flight, Derek stayed by the window for a moment longer, watching the streets below, taxis pulling up, doormen helping guests, the rhythm of hospitality at work. He thought about the night that started it all, standing in that same lobby, dismissed, ignored, unseen. How easily he could have reacted with anger or humiliation. But he hadn't. He'd chosen to lead instead. He reached for his phone and sent one quick message to corporate communications, effective immediately. All More Hospitality Properties will implement a guest-first hour, a company-wide policy ensuring that every guest request made in their first hour of check-in must be fulfilled or compensated. No exceptions, no bias, no hierarchy. He hit send. Another small change, another step toward a bigger purpose. Later that afternoon, Derek prepared to check out. As he approached the front desk, Melissa looked up, composed and confident. "Good afternoon, Mr. Moore. How was your stay this time?" He smiled. Flawless. "You've all done an incredible job." She handed him a receipt. "Thank you, sir. I just wanted to say, what you said during that meeting, about luxury being respect, it stuck with me. I've been thinking about it every day." He nodded. "Good, that's how change begins. Not with policy, with thought." As he turned to leave, the new general manager, a middle-aged woman with years of hospitality experience, hurried over. "Mr. Moore, before you go, I just wanted to say thank you. This team needed someone to remind them why they started doing this work in the first place." Derek shook her hand. "Then keep that reason alive. That's your real currency." Outside, his driver opened the car door and Derek slid in, glancing once more at the hotel's gleaming facade through the window. The same place that had denied him service was now a place that defined his vision. As the car pulled away, the city stretched out around him, busy streets, people rushing, lives intersecting in unseen ways. Derek thought of his mother again, of her steady voice saying, "How you treat people when they can't give you anything. That's who you really are." He smiled quietly. By evening, the Grand Carlton's lobby was full again. Guests arriving, phones ringing. Hand in the center of it all, Melissa answered a call with new warmth in her voice. "Good evening. This is the Grand Carlton," she said. "How can I make your stay perfect tonight?" For the first time in a long while, the words actually meant something. And far away, in a sleek corner office overlooking the Chicago skyline, Derek Moore closed his laptop and took a slow breath. The work wasn't done, not by a long shot. But the message was spreading. One hotel, one shift, one quiet moment of dignity at a time. Because leadership wasn't about power. It was about presence, the kind that left people better than it found them.